Hi everybody, once again, kitchen biology, but I'm doing it from my yard. And I want you to go to Google Classroom, and there are two documents I want you to print off. The first one is called Energy Changes During Photosynthesis and Respiration. And the other one is labeled Pinball Photosynthesis, okay? So I want you to go print those out. And again, you're gonna need a bunch of colors. Pencils, pens, or crayons, I don't care. And we're going to start with this one first, the energy changes during photosynthesis. And what I like about this is I like that it shows that plants carry on both processes of photosynthesis and respiration, but animals only do respiration. So in one way of thinking about it is that plants are actually, as far as energy goes, they're more sophisticated than we are, and that they can do both processes. They can store energy during photosynthesis, and they turn around and use the energy in respiration. I like this diagram. I like to call it the Aztec pyramid of energy, because it starts off with carbon dioxide and water, really low energy down here. Of course, you add in sunlight energy and enzymes, and it goes through the steps of photosynthesis. Get that? Steps of photosynthesis. And in the end, you end up with glucose. And the reason it's at the top of the pyramid is because it's high energy. Okay? Now to get that, and so this is then stored as starches, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. But then it turns around and it can take this glucose and break it back down and get the energy out of it, again, steps in respiration, in the form of ATP. And we talked about that in the last video. One glucose yields about 38 ATP molecules, all right? The next diagram I want to show you is a little bit more of a close-up of what's going on, kind of putting it in perspective. This being the leaf, and looking down inside of the leaf. And inside the leaf, we look at a chloroplast. And then here's the close-up of a chloroplast. And then we're going to take a little wedge out of the chloroplast, and we're going to look at this stacked structure called a grana or granum. I've heard it both ways. And now we're going to take a look at just one of those stacks called a thylakoid. And inside the thylakoid now, we're going to look at these little molecules. They're proteins that, and we're going to look at it and blow up here. This is chlorophyll. You know, the stuff that makes your blue jeans have grass stains on them when you're out there in the lawn playing football, all right? So here's the chlorophyll molecules, and there's a chlorophyll 1 and chlorophyll 2, all right? Sunlight hits them, and that causes, they trap the energy and they can move the energy. And then the next thing that happens is, see those little balls right there? Those are hydrogens. We're going to talk about them in the next diagram. And those hydrogens all build up here on one side of the thylakoid membrane. And then this molecule right here is called ATP synthase. Now you remember the part A's. A's means enzyme. That's right. This molecule is an enzyme. And what it does is when hydrogen builds up on this side, it's got to have somewhere to go. So hydrogen will build up and it'll flow through this ATP synthase molecule, and that's where it knits together two molecules, ADP and the phosphate. And it does this from that last diagram. It takes the ADP molecule here and it sticks the phosphate on. So that's actually an enzyme that facilitates that reaction. Now the next diagram, this one right here, pinball photosynthesis. Oh, I've actually pre-colored this one for the sake of time. So very quickly, here we go. All right. So of course we've got the chloroplast, and here is the granum, and those are the two chlorophyll molecules right here, okay? Those are the two chlorophyll molecules. So this is kind of what I like to call pinball photosynthesis. If you can understand how the game of pinball works, you got this made. So when you play the game of pinball, the first thing you do is you put a quarter into the machine. We're going to put water into the machine right here. And right here, water is broken apart into 3 directions. Oxygen comes off. There's the oxygen coming off. So here's H2O. Oxygen is broken off right away, and that's the oxygen that you and I breathe. The next one is the hydrogens. The hydrogens are stripped of their electrons. I'm just going to draw the electrons like 2 little steelies like you would have in a pinball game. And it's picked up by the chlorophyll molecule. Now, here comes the sun, and the sun hits that chlorophyll molecule, and it energizes those electrons. And those electrons fly up to a high energy level. But just like in a game of pinball, they don't stay there. They start immediately falling back down. And when they do, this is where they pick up ADP and the phosphate. This is where they use their energy to transfer ADP to a phosphate. And you're making ATP. I'm going to color that in pink. Now look at the little pathway. We're going to come back to ATP. We're going to come back to ATP in a few minutes, in just like a couple minutes. Okay, so now you've got the electrons, and the electrons move, oops, here we go, and the electrons move here, and they are picked up by another chlorophyll molecule. So it's kind of like they're just being passed along, just like in pinball. And this little thing, when the ATP is made, it's like racking up points in the pinball game. Cha-ching, 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 over and over. So here's your little steelies again, your electrons. Sunlight comes in, whacks them again. This is kind of like hitting the flippers on the side of the pinball game. And again, they fly up to a high energy level. And sometimes in the game of pinball, it'll get stuck between 2 bumpers, and it'll go up and down, and it'll go back and forth and back and forth. Cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. Well, that's what's happening right here. Again, ADP and phosphates are linked together to make more ATP. So think about in the game of pinball, you're racking up points. Photosynthesis, we're racking up ATPs. Look at that. Cha-ching, 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 over and over. Now, there's one more thing. Sometimes in the game of pinball, there's like one corner or there's one arch or something where you can really rack up some mega points. And in photosynthesis, that's what's called the Hill reaction. Right here, the Hill reaction. And those 2 electrons now, oh, look at this. Look at these hydrogens. Follow the hydrogen pathway. And look what happens to the hydrogens. That's right. Those hydrogens get reunited with their electrons. And they get connected with a molecule called NADPH. And when they get that hydrogen on them, guess what they're called? NADPH. Right. So this molecule, high energy molecule, man, this is like all the points. And this NADPH then, it's shuttled down here outside. All right, now let's look at something. Now you've got the ATP points, cha-ching, 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 and now you've got NADPH. Whoop, 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 high energy points. They transfer all of their energy to a molecule from the outside called CO2. This is the light reaction up here. Duh, light. This is the dark reaction. Not because it happens at night, but because it happens in the absence. It doesn't need light to happen. It's all enzyme powered. But look what happens. Carbon dioxide comes in, and ATP and NADPH are broken apart by enzymes. ADP comes back off, and the phosphate, pow, leaves its energy behind. NADPH leaves its hydrogen behind. And what you end up with here in the end is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. it gets rearranged into carbohydrate. And there you go, carbohydrates, sugar. Pinball photosynthesis. So you thought that plants are out there having a fun time? They're playing pinball. There you go.